Boards games. We might be talking about boards games, but we're not gonna shout. Today, my guest is Tim Fowers, who will talk about their powers, and their powers include being alive. You've made it so many years, so I guess high five. And also making several games. For example, Walkstar and Paperback are some of those names. We'll talk about life and board games and everything in between. Soon we'll begin, and then you'll know what I mean. Board games and everything else is what we're talking about. Board games and everything else. I'm not gonna shout. Hello and good morning, good afternoon, good whatever time it is, wherever you are. And yes, thank you for joining me for episode of Busy Beats and relatively briefer Blether.
Hey, thanks for having me.
No, thank you for coming on. So, and hello, Jess says, hello, Tim. Who's that nutter? I think Jess might be trolling me and asking, who's Bez? Who's this crazy person?
Which nutter?
Would you say we're both nutters?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of have to be.
Like, do you think that all creative people have... I think Eric Lang on Twitter a few weeks ago said something like, oh, all... game designers are kind of weird and we should be more proud of this fact.
Yeah, I mean, as a when I was like 12, kind of in that tween range, I kind of embraced the nerd persona. But then the nerds kind of won in pop culture and tech and all this stuff. So it's kind of a weird place right now where, a lot of the heads of these tech firms are pretty weird. So yeah, I guess it's kind of normalized now.
Yeah, like we can have a few more eccentricities and just relish in who we are, I guess. And a quick hello to Timmy and J Fool's Guard. And Jess is saying, oh my gosh, Tim is American. Is this true though?
Yes, yes. I am from the States. But
For some reason, I wasn't sure if you were American or, USA or Canadian, which is also kind of American in the same way that British people are European. It's a weird thing, like naming a country after a continent. I say that so often.
I've noticed that that a lot of Brits are really concerned about, they don't want to label you American or Canadian because they've been burned by that. And so they're like, I detect an accent. And then they kind of like, they dance around it a little bit. And then, but they want to know where you're from. It's fun.
So, and hello, Nicholas. It is lovely to see you. Today, it's a typical meeting a person show. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask about your childhood in a wee bit. Then we'll go into how you fell into love with games, your time at Amazon maybe, and doing video games. What was it called? Clockwords? Was that the game of your...
Yeah. Now Boarding was a video game. Clockwords was a video game that I did kind of as an indie about 12 years ago.
Yeah, I played that Clockwords on Congregate back in the day. That was... Yeah, it was good fun. It was like, oh, there's like just a bit more to it than just the words, which was quite fun. It kind of, you could almost see the genesis, maybe I'm stretching a bit too much, of Paperback, because it's like word building plus something else, and you can almost draw a line through it. But we'll talk about that. But first of all, let's talk about recent highlights, living life and seeing the sights, recent highlights, playing games and other delights. So this is a part of the show where I invite everyone to talk about what's been good, what have you managed to achieve, and anything else that you feel the need to get off your chest. For myself, I've not played any board games yesterday. I did do a wee bit of clearing, and I was sad to see that there was a large amount of damp. And so some of my notebooks, they have been curled quite a bit, which is kind of, I had all these notes and, they're still just about usable, but it wasn't done with permanent marker, so the pen's a little bit more blurry. And yeah, that's really problematic, having a bit of damp in the room. But life goes on. I did go to yoga yesterday evening. That was a good time, and that feels like an achievement. And so that's what I want to get off my chest. How about you, Tim? What's been going on with you recently?
I've seen at the store here in the UK, they have an entire section that's moisture control. It's like all these things to keep things from getting soggy here. And it's an issue. Just recently, let's see. A big thing for me is every fortnight I get together with at a local tavern here and play music with some other people, and so I was like, and I'm really pretty new. I play the bagpipes, and I'm pretty bad, but I don't care, and so I play, and the group is really supportive, and so they helped me get some music, and they're like, okay, this should work with us, and so I was practicing it a whole bunch. And then I went and played with them, and I only botched like half the song.
Nice work. That's quite an unusual skill to have.
Yeah. I've been about 4 years in doing bagpipes, and I do Highland pipes, and I do small indoor pipes.
I completely disagree with Jess. How do you respond to these allegations that bagpipes never sound good?
There is no neutral territory on bagpipes. It is by its nature, you love it or hate it. So I try not to be too pushy. But,
it's kind of like metal, I guess. Like it's the most metal of all the instruments if you think about it. Oh my gosh, we should have like proper metal but with bagpipes, because it is kind of like the most screaming instrument. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think we should make a new genre, like metal with bagpipes and trumpet.
Yeah. I could get behind that. There is that band, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and they do a lot of mashup stuff with like that. But so no, it's been just a good midlife crisis. Take on a new hobby, and one of the reasons I wanted to come to the UK is learn some local tunes here and whatnot. But it's been fun, and during COVID, I'd go out and play for people just to get practice and whatnot. But
I guess that's at least an instrument that you can play from a safe social distance.
Oh yeah, no one's getting close to that. It's great. I mean, and it goes right through walls. Like, people can be in their homes, and it just goes right through. It's
I mean, it's like a trumpet. Unfortunately, I do play trumpets, not very well, but it's not something that I can practice in my house unless I put a mute on it. And so I've been to the park, and one of my songs that I wrote is actually playing the trumpet on Primrose Hill. This was just such a magical moment for me one year, and then playing the trumpet, and then someone just started dancing to it. There were light lanterns flowing through the sky. But normally, if you play the trumpet, it is kind of, you are dominating, like whether it's the trumpet, whether it's the bagpipe. There are certain instruments that you are dominating no matter what.
They don't play nice per se. That my son did. He did trumpet and and some. I can't remember. He tried trombone a little bit. He was in the middle school, band, and he was kind of learning the lip movement and going through the whole process. But with pipes, you can always play the chanter. So you just it's like a recorder. And so, there's always kind of an option to play. But when I'm in a hotel or something, I'm even hesitant to play that because I'm like, how thin are the walls here? I don't really want to,
Yeah. So. Good morning, Alex, who says, or should I say good night? Well, actually, Tim is in the UK just now, which does, might ask about that in a moment. We've got, so... Apparently, Jess joined some real-life Americans in the past in Seattle online today for the ADHD group. Cool. I hope that was a good time. And Jay Foolsguard has been getting up early. Congratulations. Well done. And let's move on to the Questionably Quick Questions is the section. It's not an interrogation. It's just a Questionably Quick Questions section. So, Questionably Quick Questions. What are 3 of your favorite games, Tim?
3 of my favorite games. Dominion is a classic. I got a lot of mileage out of that. Tigris and Euphrates, always a really impressive game. And then like Netrunner. Those are kind of like and those are probably more that I like. I like them almost more conceptually than I get to play them a lot.
Would you say that because of their length and because of their depth, you don't maybe actually fully delve in as often as you'd like?
Yeah. Or finding people to play or whatnot. But I've just always been impressed with those. I mean, when there's been digital options for some of them, I've gotten some plays in. But I don't actually. I try to get game nights together, but as a designer, I don't play as much as you think I do. It's like I like to play games, but when you turn your hobby into your job, it's a little different. So like, it's weird. I'll definitely be thinking about games a lot and reading about games and watching playthroughs and whatnot and coordinating playtests between people. But a lot of times I have to kind of force myself to be like, I need to try a new, I need to try a game that I haven't tried or something like that. But yeah, so. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, how often do you get to play?
I mean, I try to play quite often. I try to join the Wednesday group, and I sometimes a lot of my socializing is done through board games, I guess, because my neighbor, when they were here Monday nights, we used to meet up, have a chat, have a meal together, and play a couple of games. And same with McCall and Krys, who used to live here and then moved 10 minutes away. We might meet once every couple of weeks, and when we meet, there's always a game involved. I think most of my social activity is through games, and because my main hobby otherwise is dancing, which kind of doesn't feel quite right because I'm really into partner dancing. So that's kind of contact with maybe 10, 20 people every time you go, which is kind of inappropriate when there's a pandemic going on. But yeah, I feel like most of my hours of playing games is definitely either on Friday daytime playtests or solo playtests, or maybe at conventions and showing off stuff.
Yeah. My son just woke up.
Hello. Hope you're well. Hey, Gabe.
So Gabe met, I know this is for the audience. Gabe met Bez at, was it 2008? No, it's 20.
No.
2000. What was our first year? 2017.
Yeah, 2017. At the Four Elements stand.
Yes, and I was there sharing a stand with, and that was the first year that I started a cat gallery, and I think all of you drew a cat.
Yes, we did cats, and then you had Yogi there, I think.
Yeah, we got
Yeah.
Yogi. I still have the little keychain thingy.
Yes, it was 2017 for sure, because that's when it came out, and then they'd given me a bunch of stuff and said, oh, you can just give this away if you want. And I was like, yeah, great. That sounds like fun. I enjoy giving things away. But yeah, it's good to see you.
They've gotten their mileage out of Yogi.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, awesome.
But Gabe is a little bit of he's starting a little bit of game design, and he helps me test stuff and gives me ideas and whatnot. Yeah.
And we've got a quick question for Gabe, which is, do you like the UK?
Yeah, it's definitely got more interesting things than America. There's so many more buildings and all the shops are different.
Yeah. So what do you like? Do you like the food more here or there?
Oh yeah, there's definitely better food.
Here. So you heard it here first. And Jess says correct answer.
And
no, there's no correct answers. It's just
you're
your
a fan
opinion.
of haggis, right?
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
Nice. And I think you have to enjoy haggis in all its different ways. I think we should get back to some of the other questions, but it's been lovely to see you.
Yeah.
And
okay, we'll see you later.
We'll see you.
So we had Jess asks if I folded my belly. Yes, I did fold my belly in multiple directions. Alex asks, would you rather have a duck-sized meeple or a meeple-sized duck?
I don't know. I mean, a duck that small would be kind of cool. I mean, it could fly and everything. Yeah, that'd be
okay.
Neat.
Salty Horse, hello, lovely to see you. What's attracted you in the first place to playing bagpipes?
I mean, I think it was a mix of things. It's like I had heard that musical instruments were good for just kind of like keeping your brain, happy and awake, and but also I had gotten into the kind of the kilt culture through like Gen Con and whatnot. Kilts had kind of something, so I picked up a kilt. And
do you have any Scottish heritage at all?
I have some. I'm a little more Irish, so I have a county mayo, because in Ireland they go by the county. I have a county mayo tartan, but I would just I got a kilt. It was fun to have, and I wear it to church and whatnot. And people would give me a hard time. They're like, "Well, when are you going to play the bagpipes?" And I'm like, "Well, maybe I will." And so I started learning.
They were kind of saying it as a sarcastic, "Oh, when are you going to play the bagpipes?"
Yeah. And I'm like, well,
Nice.
So, but I've just enjoyed it. I never did an instrument, so I always, I guess I never found one that was weird enough, and so this fit the bill.
Jess says maybe we were related in a past life, because Jess
yeah.
is apparently Irish, and it's true. I do play many things in a percussive way. This
Go ahead.
Have you considered Burgle Brothers kids, like trying to crack into a cookie jar or sneaking out of class? And maybe there's hall monitors, because we don't have hall monitors in the UK, but that's an American thing that we're familiar with.
Well, I think there's two games that probably did it better already. Nuns on the Run does that really well. That was one of my inspirations, which is a stealth game for a group of people about kids in a nunnery kind of thing. And then How to Rob a Bank, put out by Force Pruzan Creative, and they did finally admit that they were inspired by Burgle Bros when they made it, but it definitely had some parallels, so it was good to hear. But yeah, so I think for me it's like I hadn't thought too much about a kids version. I was working on a kids version of Now Boarding, but it didn't really come together. It was kind of a hard game to simplify, so it didn't really work out.
I mean, it kind of feels like, for sure, you need to make some editorial decisions in, okay, what is the soul? And in the adult version, you might be able to have 2 or 3 things and give them equal priority. But with the kids version, if you can only maintain one of those mechanisms, really, then you have to make some hard decisions. And at a certain point, is it even the same thing or not?
Yeah. It's an interesting thought, though. It's like I would like to get a kids game of version of one of my games out at some point, but I don't have anything I'm really planned out yet. So
okay, so meeples or figurines?
Figurines in what sense? Like
do you prefer having plastic or lead or whatever figurines that's in a board game, or do you prefer having like little wooden things?
Generally go with meeples. I mean, I've done some minis, just kind of once, because people liked the characters and we wanted to kind of play with the characters. And I found I found somebody who was able to translate our visual style into 3D, and so we have done a limited set of miniatures. So I really like them, but most of my games is do meeples. You know, as you can see in Burgle and Boarding, and most of them is meeples.
Yeah, it seems to be. So it's not just a sense of this is cheaper to make. It's also that you prefer the aesthetics, or is it environmental concerns, or is it a bit of all?
Yeah, mostly it's just been. I mean, I think which factor? I think for me, it was probably cost. I was really intimidated initially by the mold cost. The mold costs are really expensive for injection molding. It's interesting how environmental has become more of a factor these days, which cuts an interesting line through the industry, because you've got like sleeves aren't good, vacuum trays aren't good, and whatnot. But you know, boxes, chipboard, and cards. But cards often have like linen finish, which is technically plastic. So like, it'll be interesting to see if that becomes a larger factor. And then there's like the wear and tear factor. It's like people sleeve a game so they can get more mileage out of it, and so they don't have to buy another copy. And so there's like this trade-off of like, well, you're preserving the copy that you're playing, but you're using plastic. So I don't know. I haven't really thought a lot about the environmental, but it's interesting to think about.
Yeah, it's a weird. It's a complicated question, and it's not a simple answer. But I mean, my gut says that sleeves are not good, especially for a game where it's not critical that cards are unmarked. I mean, imagine In a Bind or the predecessor to Yogi. Like, if in that game you knew exactly what card was coming up next, it wouldn't really even matter. Whereas, for sure, in Burgle Brothers, if you know which way the guard's going to go next, would that be a problem? Maybe, but you can always flip the top card over and kind of put that on the deck to hide most of it away, or you could even draw from the bottom of the deck if you really needed to.
Well, we had a discoloration problem with some of the Burgle 2 patrol deck, like that specific problem with the guard. There was a few cards that were like a slightly different tinge of orangish red. And for some people, it was a big deal. They're like, you know, now I know which cards are coming next, and that's going to mess up the game. And then we're just like, well, you can just like play with the deck face up and just take the top card off each time, and then you don't get effects. So another fun one to do is as a game design tool is you can do if you want to do double-sided cards like they do in Fury of Dracula, you just draw off the bottom of the deck. And that's kind of always an option. So, all right, sorry, you had a question.
Yeah. No, that's pretty much it for the Questionably quick questions for the moment. Now, I would like to ask you, what's one of your favorite things in life? Let's talk about it as a brilliant thing. What's something which is brilliant, in your opinion?
I don't know all the nuance of brilliant in kind of British English.
It genuinely means very good.
Sure. I mean, we've just
there's no subtext to it. It's not like, oh, that's fine, and you mean, oh, it's actually kind of rubbish. It's no sarcasm here. Genuinely, what is something that you enjoy in life? We've talked about breathing. We've talked about parts of our body. We've talked about oxygen. We've talked about boxes and decisions and choices and wood. And
well, I think exploring. So since I've been here in the UK, they have these kind of paths that go through. There's like easements basically that you can kind of go and explore in any direction. And for me, it's just super satisfying to be like, wonder what's down this road and down this pedestrian, you know. And so I've gone in every direction. I've been staying in Alnwick in Northumberland, and I've just yesterday I went along this wall up to Hume Park and just followed it for a couple of miles and got up to this big radar station that was all top secret up by Hume. And like I've done that and just found these amazing vistas and these and just these really interesting corners. It's super satisfying for me just the satisfaction of exploring and choosing a direction to go and just seeing where it takes you is really satisfying.
That's true. And yeah, just walking and wandering things, I agree with that. And Jess says, you're allowed to go out now in the UK. We have loads of footpaths. And also wants to mention their own little stuffed shark from IKEA. I think that what it reminds me of is this one time I went to Venice, and then when you're in a new place, it's so fantastic because you can just walk down the streets and you can say, okay, which of these streets looks more interesting to me? Go in that direction. And then just at every junction, say which looks more interesting. And then you can wander for hours. And then after like maybe an hour or 2 hours, you're like, okay, I'm going to come back home. And that can be such a joyous thing. The other thing that I want to talk about, so I don't know if you've ever tried this, is a randomized walk. So I used to do this with a friend. We'd literally randomize it where we'd play rock, paper, scissors at every junction. If the person on the left won, we turn left. If the person on the right wins, you turn right. And if it's a draw, you go straight forward. You have to make up other rules for when there's more than 3 ways or whatever, but you can work it out. And then we noticed that we kind of got into a loop too often. So we were kind of walking around the same block a few times. We're like, okay, we're changing the rules. So it's semi-randomized. So 3 times during the walk, each of us is allowed to override a decision and say, no, actually, we're going this way, no matter what. And that kind of stopped us from going just aimlessly around the same bit for too long. And we'd set a timer and say, okay, once this timer goes off, then we'll kind of make our way back home. And that was just a lovely thing, having a chat, having a walk. But yeah, I missed that. So maybe...
Well, and one of the best, are you in Edinburgh?
In London right now.
Oh, okay. Because Edinburgh is just amazing to explore, you know, walking, because we got to visit up there. And, you know, going up near the Royal Mile, you like look over this ledge and it goes down like 50 feet and you're like, what? It feels like this like MC Escher type, you know, well, it was really trippy to and you could, that's an amazing city to explore in.
And yeah, Edinburgh, fantastic city, just a wonderful, it's how beautiful it is. And apparently randomized walk is a computer algorithm, which I may have known, I can't remember, but I'll check that out at some point if you're recommending
it. Is it pink noise or brown noise? One of those 2 algorithms is a randomization relative to your current location, so it'll go up or down based on the previous data. So it's not fully random; it's just plus or minus from the last number. Jeff Eaglestein has done
Game Tech on it.
Yeah, he's done a whole talk on brown noise and pink noise and what they're useful for. So there's your science.
So we did actually miss this, but where are you right now? I know.
Northumberland, yeah.
Okay, cool. And so let's rewind. Let's get to know each other. Tim, what is your first memory that you're willing to share?
First memory? Like at all?
Like, yeah, first memory. Like, was it walking towards the TV screen? Was it being fed by your mom? Was it...
No, I would remember...
being hit on the head?
I think I was really young, maybe 3. I have a couple memories from when I was 3. And I remember sitting on the little, like, kind of push horse thing. I was sitting on it. I think I was crying. I'm not sure, but I was at the intersection of the house there and just kind of sitting there. And then I have another memory of like a t-shirt I had, a shirt that I had, and pulling open my drawer and looking at it. Just little glimpses like that.
I mean, was there anything special about this t-shirt?
No, these are just little snippets. I mean, 3 is really young. So it's just little pieces. But I was on a farm growing up.
Okay, wow.
We had a dairy farm. And so
you grew, was it manual milking or was it machine milking?
No, it was machine milking. We had about 200 head. But at that point, so my dad, it was really him and his father when they were, because it was a generational farm. And so my dad, when he was a kid, he had to be up at 4 a.m. to milk. But that didn't happen to me because at that point they had hired a lot of help and they had a lot of farm hands. And so I still helped on the farm, but I didn't have to do that really rigorous, getting up early, gotta do the stretches. So yeah, so being on a farm was is interesting. And you definitely get more connected to things, like where your food's coming from, and animals and nature and whatnot, and even stuff like death. Like you see animals die, and you'll even in some cases eat animals. It's different.
So like when one of the dairy cows was no longer producing milk, would that be at the end of its life, and then would you slaughter it for meat? Or
yeah, I mean, I wasn't really around for a lot of the slaughtering, but I mean, we were also in a hunting culture, so like we would hunt deer, and then and we would have venison for the rest of the year, things like that. But we would slaughter some of the cows occasionally, and I never saw any of that process. I was like 8 when we left, so I didn't see them actually killing animals. But I remember the cow being strung up, like it didn't have fur anymore, and different. We even had some Latinos on the farm that were, and they were interested in a lot of the parts that we weren't. And so we'd be like, okay, we're going to take these, and they'd take what they wanted out of it, and it was an interesting cultural thing as well. So, but yeah,
kind of sharing the meat, sharing the resources, and making sure that nothing's wasted.
Yeah. So, but that kind of thing. I mean, and also like, just the harvesting and whatnot, like the whole process of planting and fertilizing, harvesting, and we had big equipment. I mean, interesting here in the UK how much farming there still is, and how much land they still dedicate to different types of agriculture.
So, what's your first memory of games or playing? I guess you played a lot of games of pretend. I mean, that's kind of natural for a child.
Games specifically, I guess one that was interesting, I guess it's not necessarily games related, but when I was in kindergarten, so I think I was 5 or 6, Transformers came out, and they were it. I mean, for kids, like it took over. Like Transformers were it. They were a freaking car, and they're a robot. Like your mind was blown. But I mean, as a kid, we weren't poor, but we didn't really have. I didn't always get what I wanted, and Transformers were expensive, and so my parents didn't get them for me, and so we had a book about doing papercraft, and it was all these geometric shapes, how to make a dodecahedron, and how to make a cube and whatnot, and in like a papercraft way. And so I extrapolated. I'm like, well, if I change these dimensions, I can make these different shapes, and then I can like glue them together. And I actually built fully transforming Transformers.
Wow.
Just because I wanted to make it happen.
Why not?
So, so it was just one of those things where it's like, I've always been like, when I want to create something, I just kind of like try to figure out the steps to get there. And then with my recent games where I have like these transforming boxes and whatnot, it kind of for me is a little homage to back those days. But yeah, I mean that
with the flipping and the magnetism and
yeah, just the way they like I don't know if you've seen the Sabotage box. It's like these DeLorean doors that open, and then it becomes the barrier for the game. So things like that. But games specifically, when I was into Star Trek Next Generation when I was like 12, and I saw that 3D chess, and I'm like, well, that's got to be playable, So I designed a 3D chess game, like, not with much play testing or anything. I don't, it wasn't very fun or playable, but it, so I designed it in like 7th grade. So I was like 13 maybe. And then the next year I had a woodshop class. And so I spent most of that semester building the 9 different levels of this 3D chessboard and figuring out a support structure for them. And so I still have that in my office. I don't know if I've got a picture of it anywhere, but it's a reminder to me of just like, you know, the game wasn't great, but it was a snapshot of me at the time. And you know,
like your interest in Star Trek and your desire to play this 2-player abstract strategy game.
Yeah, and but just the follow through to make it right, because a lot of times people have ideas, and so a lot of these things for me is just like seeing it all the way through, even if like you get frustrated or you change your mind, you know, like just sticking with a project and through kind of as an obligation to the idea. I mean, I feel a lot of that when I have an idea. I feel like a bit of an obligation to share it with people, because the idea, if I just keep it to myself, is selfish. And so I try to like see things through and try to do the best version of that idea. Because if your ideas are kind of like your kids, you kind of owe it to the idea. So
this notion of kind of owing it to the idea, I kind of completely relate. And for me, the payoff, the joy of a game is when other people are enjoying it. I mean, it's fantastic to hear that you and Gabe have been enjoying Yogi, and like kind of when I'm at a convention and then I see people engage with something, when I see on a forum someone saying, oh, I enjoyed this game, whatever, you know, that for me is the bit that I enjoy. If I could honestly just like fast forward for the rest of it, I would probably keep the initial brainstorming, and I really enjoy the playtesting. But then there's a massive part that I'm like, yeah, I'm not enjoying this so much, where it's like, okay, I'm not a fan of writing rules, I have to admit, but like I do it because it has to be done. I'm not like, want some kind of in the flow of doing the art, okay, it's okay, but like getting there can be quite tricky. But it's like just the moments after I've done, like there is the adrenaline to, yeah, look at the thing I made. Okay, these ones I'm not so keen on, but these ones I'm actually quite happy that I drew something I'm proud of. But during the process, it's kind of keeping that end point in mind. Do you feel similarly?
Oh yeah, no, I just call it the slog, where it's like there's just parts of game development that just aren't fun, and so I try to get help, and a lot of it is you just got to buckle up and put the time in and work through it. Right now we're making Paperback Adventures, which is like this massive balance game where it's like we have, you know, tons of unique cards for 3 different classes, and it's like this big talent balance task, and it's a little overwhelming, but you know, just putting the time in and plowing through it. I mean, also I do feel what helps is to have external deadlines and external you know, audience, because I find like with games there's kind of like the phases I go through. There's like a honeymoon phase where you're really excited about the idea, and you're like, okay, this is gonna work, like you have it in your head, and that'll get you through like 3 prototypes generally, right, where you're like, okay, this is a new thing, I'm excited to get it in front of people, and if it doesn't really start to click by that point, you know, I'll usually lose steam. But once I get it to the point where it's showing promise, in the early stages, it's like it's not quite working, but it's still like, but people are kind of excited about it. So I usually get the energy from my playtesters. If they're kind of like, I like this part of it, but it kind of fell down in these ways, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna make it better for you. I'm gonna fix that thing, and that'll push me towards the next prototype, and then that kind of iteration goes through, and I'm kind of doing it for them, and then eventually there's like, well, when can I buy this? You know, when it's kind of gotten to that point, and I'm like, all right. So then I do a Kickstarter, and then like, then you're legally obligated to to finish the job. So, you know, really using that external pressure of playtesters and Kickstarter backers and whatnot has been able to help me just get through the process.
It's interesting because there's definitely a sense of, as time goes on, like my projects are literally just card games that are not in a super fancy box or anything. So there's a point where I'm kind of feeling like, yeah, I want to have all the arts done ahead of time, because with Categorical, which was meant to be a new version of the L deck, it was so exasperating. I think that's the word. Exasperating, kind of. COVID happened, and then I wasn't, and now I'm kind of having trouble communicating with the manufacturer, and like they're just not replying, which is kind of rubbish. And I've talked to Vegard, hey, could you help me chat to this person, because you both speak the same native language, whereas I don't speak Polish. Maybe you can speak to them. And then Vegard was like, yeah, I kind of found the same, that they didn't reply to me that often. And then I said, well, could you maybe help find an alternative manufacturer? But I mean, there's always going to be the potential for things to fall down. But then on top of that is the truth that I don't have the final files finished yet. And so there's stuff that I still have to do, and it's kind of being like, yeah, it's overdue. It should have come out like at the start of this year, but you know, people are forgiving because 2020 happened as it did. But at the same time, it's preying on my mind now. Whereas when it was my latest Kickstarter, like it was okay, almost all the art was done. I had to do like 8 extra images, but then the images were of the style that I knew I could do them within a day. And then I was like, okay, this is it. Send it to the printer, get them. And I've literally sent them all. Like people started getting their copies within like 4 weeks of the Kickstarter finishing. And then like 4 weeks after that, it's all basically done. And but at the same time, when it came to my first ever Kickstarter, I had so much joy, and it changed. Like In a Bind, which is the predecessor to Yogi, the art was slightly different because of how of the suggestions that people made. I'm not going to say I used all the feedback. Whenever people ask for a card that takes away a card, so it kind of makes the game easier, it's like, no, that's not happening, because it's important that the game escalates. And if you want it to de-escalate, then that's moving the game in the wrong direction. I'm sorry, but it's kind of just this one thing that non-designers keep saying, oh, how about this? And it's like, sorry, I appreciate your
what they say, like, you listen, when you get feedback, primarily listen to their problems. Like whatever them. Don't necessarily listen to their solutions. But occasionally they'll catch a blind spot where you're like, oh, that's a really good solution. It's something really elegant.
Absolutely.
Come from a playtester, and it's always good to. So definitely a grain of salt, though.
But yeah, I think it's so important to listen, and maybe like a playtester submits an idea, and then it's like, actually, this is perfect. Yes, let's add turnips to this game, or let's do this. But I was recently flouting an idea kind of making a Kickstarter for 60 days. And at the start, not even knowing what kind of game it would be, except that it would be one deck of cards. And then it's like, okay, this is going to be a game with 54 cards. I know nothing else. Okay, first week, what kind of game should it be? Make your suggestions. And then in the first few days, I'll do like some extended brainstorming. I'll work like, flat out for those few days, try out some ideas, go to playtest on Friday with like 3 or 4 games, try them all out, and see what I think. And then by the end of like the second week, have like a solid, this is what we're moving towards. And then like by the end of the Kickstarter, either people are, okay, I'll keep my pledge because I've enjoyed the journey, or I'll up my pledge because I really want a physical copy of the game, or I'll cancel my pledge because I'm short on money and I don't want to support a game I'm not actually liking.
Well, it's interesting to do that around, because it's like you can start a Discord and have people involved in the development process. It would be interesting to try to do that out in the open, and having the structure of like the deadlines and stuff. I think can help. So you'd have to see, though. I mean, it depends on it depends on the cycle with people. The trick though is like, when you kind of get those larger pivots, like with clock words, the deck building came in super late. Like the way you put the balls in the boiler. I just played Dominion. I'm like, this is super great. And so we put that in very, very late. And so it'd be interesting to kind of like follow a process. But if the design is kind of crystallizing as you go, you know, sometimes you can kind of get to a point where you're like, oh, we really need to back up and go down this other path. And those kind of pivots can be tough. And I've even seen it with like designer publisher relations, where like either the designer wants to make a big change or the publisher wants to make a big change.
But the essence is still going to be there. It's not like you made a word game and then you added this extra element to it to flesh it out, but it's not like you take away the soul of the game. If it's still aiming for the same audience, it's still aiming for the same experience, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm just saying in general, that's kind of development can get interesting that way and that can be a friction between a designer and a publisher when there are these pivots and there's a disagreement of like, no, this is what the game is, and the other party is like, no, this will make it more accessible, or this will, you know, and even debating on like, you know, identifying the soul of the game and being like, you know, this is my understanding of the core conceit of the game. I mean, I think a good way to look at games is emotional design. In games create situations that produce emotions.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, if you can look at a game and be like, how do I feel when I'm playing this game? And as a designer, you have to kind of like be able to have an antenna that's like, you're sensitive to your like, okay, I'm playing this game, and you have to be able to kind of freeze and be like, how am I feeling right now because of these choices and this, you know, and these forces at work? How is that making me feel? And so I think the highest level of design is when you can be like, this is my emotional goal. I want people to feel this. And then trying things until you get there. And that's what I'm saying. Sometimes you could have these really big pivots because it could be like, maybe we're hitting too many dead ends that are pulling us away from this emotional thing. So maybe we need to scrap this whole system and pivot over to this because we have this goal. And it's very abstract to talk about, but I think like one I figured out with like Burgle Bros. Burgle Bros, I wanted to make an Ocean's 11 experience, like, because there's a long story, but basically it's like I had kind of pitched another game as Ocean's 11, the board game, to people at a convention, and they were really excited about what that was, and that game was not that game. But I could see the light in their eyes. I'm like, oh man, that's a fantasy that people really want to come play out.
And you didn't live up to the fantasy, and now you had to make something that actually realized that.
Yeah. And so by kind of, you know, searching around, I got a game that felt like it, but I didn't even know how to express the emotion. And so later I was able to kind of codify it, and I gave a talk at GDC about Burgle Bros. And and I think it's cleverness. It's that you get to feel like you're always outwitting the alarms and the guard and all that. You get to feel like you've got the plan, you've got your act together, and no one's going to catch you. You know, like you're kind of outwitting the whole system, and that cleverness became, you know, the core emotion that helped design like Burgle 2 and whatnot. But like I think it can be good whether is either as a primary thing or as a secondary, where you're like, man, I really like the emotion that this other game made, or maybe this other game I made, and I want to play into that more. And a lot of times you have to just try, you know, it's like you're like a cook, and you're just like, okay, let's try different combinations of ingredients and see what that tastes like. And then is that taste like this emotion, you know? And a lot of it's kind of combinatorial, where you're just trying to try different spices and ingredients in new ways, trying to find a new kind of peanut butter and chocolate that really works.
Yeah, using the mechanisms as the colors of paint for your canvas.
Yeah.
So. A quick hello to PNP community. Thanks for jumping in. Yeah, I think I was just kind of playing off when you talk about the impact of a Kickstarter community, because you're legally obligated to make this thing. And even if at the start I say, okay, by the end there is this, if people have pledged to give me money, even if it hasn't gone to my bank account yet, I kind of feel a lot more pressure. I think that would actually make it happen. Whereas someone said, "Oh, why not just do a Discord or a Facebook group?" And it's like, that doesn't feel the same. It doesn't feel like I really have to do it. Do you know what I mean?
It's the public accountability.
Yeah, exactly. But let's rewind a wee bit and talk about how you got into making digital games. Like back at the start, how did you get into Flash games? How did you get into Amazon? Can you talk about that journey a wee bit?
Yeah. I mean, it kind of started. I kind of finished college and went into a career, and it was just kind of like, I didn't have a particular thing I wanted to do. I just, had some general vague direction. But I kind of bumped into a couple things. There was around 2005. There was the indie dev community. So games like Braid, World of Goo, a lot of the early indie games were starting to make inroads where it's like, oh, these are really elegant and they're achievable by a small team. So that was kind of on one side of my head. And then I finally had gotten into the Euro scene. Like it was actually through Twilight Imperium. They were doing a 3rd edition and they were borrowing the roll mechanism from Puerto Rico. And then I'm like, well, what's Puerto Rico? And then I kind of went down that route. And I ended up with the one that really blew me away was actually Power Grid. In the way that the auction and the different resources and their price going up and whatnot. I was looked at how elegant it was and how fun it was for what it was doing with so little, And so I kind of pushed off into wanting to make games around 2005 with a buddy of mine, and we started making video games. But I was also inspired by board games. So to me, the path started at the same time, but I didn't actually start making board games until 2009 when I started with Walkstar, because my programmer buddy was busy coding and I didn't have anything left to do. And so I'm like, well, I can make a board game. And so I started to kind of express that. But for me, I've always been bouncing between the two media. It's just like, they're both good at different things. It's one way by my electrics. So
Power Grid, needs to be careful with your electrics, says Alex.
Yeah, you got to watch your voltage. You bring your stuff over from the States, it'll get blown up when you plug it in the UK. So it's been I keep bouncing between. So I keep making video games and I keep making board games. But I mean, we did have a mild success with Nowboarding. If you go to nowboarding.us, it's also on Steam now. But Nowboarding was the first kind of mild hit we had, and that actually let us keep making games for a couple more years. But Clockwords never really monetized really well. And so after that, we're kind of like, well, this isn't really working out. We've been doing this for 3-4 years now. Maybe we go work in the industry. And so I came and I worked in Utah for a little bit at a smaller publisher. And then I ended up as a game designer at Amazon. And that was fun, but Amazon didn't really know what they wanted. And eventually they just kind of wanted to make Halo and, kind of these core games. So
at the start, they were making stuff for the Kindle, is that right?
Yeah. So the team I was with was making games for the Kindle, making those, and that was very much.
What is that like? I mean, for the Kindle, because that's a really slow refresh rate. Is this kind of like text adventure stuff? Is it?
Oh, I don't know if you saw any of them, but they did just different word search games and kind of Boggle type stuff. Just really simple things that you don't have to refresh very often because the e-ink display. But they had already kind of moved on by the time I got there, and we were working on the Amazon phone, which had some really cool features that you now see in like the iPhone X and whatnot. But and so we were kind of doing tech demos. We even worked on some early stuff for Alexa. So we were kind of like the proving out the tech with games, and that was really fun. But then they started to make game studios, and and so we made a game called Sub-Zero, and now they've made New World, which is but they really wanted to make. Eventually, the leadership were like, we just want to make kind of a bro game, like something that hits the core audience and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And most of our studio, they were top of the tier when it came to making casual games. So, match 3, card games, word games. The crew, the guys that were really good at that, and I learned a lot from them. And what was great is they had this brainstorming time once a week where they just like would play games and talk about them. And so I started like bringing in my board games. So like they helped me with Burgle Bros.
Like kind of doing a bit of cheeky stuff that maybe Amazon might not officially be too happy with.
Well, they weren't. I mean, technically, it wasn't against my non-compete because it was a board game, and we made.
I meant more that you were working on your board games during what was meant to be office hours.
Yeah. Well, and at the time, I didn't even think that they were necessarily going to be like Kickstarter or whatever. I just wanted to make games. Because when I first got there, I would make like little prototypes on the weekend, like in Flash and whatnot. I bring them into work, and they're like, oh, they pat me on the head, and they're like, well, keep making those things. And I'm like, so we're not gonna do any of these. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I started doing these board games, and then when it became clear that I could just kickstart them, and it was, they knew I was doing Kickstarters and whatnot, and they didn't care. So I was using a little bit of company time, but it was like an hour a week. So,
okay.
But the guys there, they're all programmers and designers and whatnot, and they were super encouraging, and they give me ideas and play test my games. They were super nice about it.
Alex wants to know if anything came of your pinball or plinko game.
Oh, my peg leg game. No, but I have another iteration in that kind of tower defense game genre that I'm working on right now, but it's super early. But yeah, what happened is I made a mashup of like Plants vs. Zombies and Peggle, but a big part of the game was prediction, where you could actually see like 4 jumps in the future of your pinball shots, and I thought that was a really important part of the game, and I kind of overinvested in it to the point that what happens is people play the game and they really have fun with it, but it gets exhausting because imagine a tool where you could see the future of chess moves, right? Mm-mm. So like if you could just like scan each piece or whatever, and you could see all the different potential futures of all the different chess moves, it becomes paralyzing after a while, where, it's this AP problem where now you have a tool that can let you search, and now you have to find the best one. And so you have to like go through. And so what happened with this aiming device where you could jump, you could see all the jumps into the future.
I kind of feel like parts of the joy of Peggle and Pachinko is that abnegation. That kind of, I'm just going to do something. Okay, now it's out of my control. Okay, I'll do something. Okay, now it's out of my control. And having that, I think, step between you have to do something and then a long time where you don't actually give any input, I think is actually part of the appeal of that, because you've got these kind of breaks.
Yeah. So that's the thing, is like I should probably release some version of Pegleg, because we actually got it to a pretty decent state, but it's that exhaustion, that prediction exhaustion. So I'm thinking about just removing it. But I have another game that's more of a clockwork tower defense thing that uses kind of the same ricochet system that we'll see if it works out. So,
and that's on Board Game Geek, apparently due to be released 2019. But things happen, and
we made a solo version of it. We did a Kickstarter where it was the digital and the physical version, and we ended up canceling the campaign. But so the one on BGG, we made a little solo game. It was actually kind of worked, but it was just like a board game representation of this video game that we were working on. But I think I need to release that in print and play. It wasn't bad, but I don't know.
There's one comment on there, someone asking last year if there's any news. So, that's like 2 people who've asked of their own volition. Like, clearly people want to buy it.
All right. Okay. Yeah. All right. I'll get.
I'm not having a go. I'm just like, I'm trying to be encouraging. I'm not trying to have a go.
No, that's good. I mean, that's the thing, is like you don't know what. Yeah, with these things, it's like, you try stuff and not everything makes it over, and one of those things where like sometimes you're not, sometimes when you're creating, you're kind of just like, it's like when you give a talk, right? You don't necessarily get a lot of feedback. Like you gave the talk and everyone clapped, and you're like, but what do you guys really think? So like sometimes when I'm, making stuff, you know, I don't really get feedback, you know, immediately depending on the project. So with a lot of these digital projects we've done, you know, we'll kind of test it. We'll test it with some friends and family and whatnot. And if it's not resonating, you don't really have the same, you know, I don't know, like it's sometimes you just don't know if maybe there is an audience out there for it and you haven't found it. But again, like if you don't have the energy that comes from people liking your game, you know, you just got, yeah.
Alex says, are they just clapping because it's over?
Yeah. So as you know, you know, get out of that honeymoon phase. You need the feedback from people that are like, hey, I like your game, but I didn't like this part of it, and you want to make it better. Some of the digital stuff I've done is just, it doesn't, I don't have the same feedback loop. And so I kind of don't know if it's worth pursuing. And so I'm just like, well, I don't know if anybody wants this, so I'll just shelf it for now, you know.
It's definitely difficult, and I know that feeling that the less feedback you get, personally, maybe this is a bad reaction to it, but I find myself hanging almost more onto every word. So
Sure.
if I've only got like 2 comments on a game, does that mean that these 2 people are actually representative of people, and just that it's an awareness issue? That maybe that what I really need to do is shout more about this. Does it mean that these are the only 2 people who will ever love it? I don't know.
Yeah.
Or in a game where, like with, I mean, and then at the start, like it's, you know, randomness, you know, the more random rolls you roll, the more kind of you're likely to find the medium. So like at the start, when I had, it was either in a bind or yogi, and there were like lots of negative things saying, what is this? This is just being silly for the sake of being silly. And it's, yes, it is. But you don't like it, that's fair enough. But like, I think I've gotten better at marketing my things to say this is what it is, and trying to put people off almost preemptively. Because Eric Martin made a really good point in the recent article about Gloomhaven. No one's going to play this unless you are really invested in a really big campaign, and that's exactly what you want. Before you start playing such a big game, you're going to have done your homework, right? Whereas with, I think that's a part of the reason why light games are actually going to be scored generally lower. It's not just because people on Board Game Geek prefer heavy games. It's also because with a light game, if it's like a 5-10 minute thing, anyone can play it. And if everyone's keen, even if everyone were to rate it, and my theory is that the people who like heavier games are more likely to rate, but even if everyone was equally likely to rate, then you're going to get the people who like it and the people who don't like it all coming together to play this 10 minutes thing because, hey, it's 10 minutes, why not? I'll give it a go. But if it's like a 1 hour epic thing, well, I'm going to do my research, so I'm also almost going to pre-select myself not playing it before I give it even a 6 or 7 out of 10, let alone something lower.
Well, and again, like, you know, I think what you do well is you know, getting people to experience a wider range of emotions in games, versus, I mean, if you look at the underlying emotions under a lot of what's popular on BGG, a lot of them are hitting the same notes. A lot of it is just like, there's either like domination, like I'm better at this thing than you know, or it's more of a passive thing where it's like, I know how to game this economic system better than you. And I mean, I'm not really big into, I mean, I like competition, but I like the emotions that come out of other things. And so like cooperative games and asymmetric games and whatnot, where I think it's a lot more welcoming, because a lot of people just don't want to feel that, you know, when it comes to a game. And so, yes, I mean, you're going to get a lot of, you know, homogenous games approved of by the BGG community, because that's the emotion they want to feel.
Yeah, and I agree that with Alex, who is saying that there is a correlation between folk who like heavy games and people who like rating and managing a collection. But yeah, what I was saying is even in addition to that, but I appreciate you talking about like this domination, this forward planning, this feeling of mastery, which is, you know, these are worthwhile. I mean, personally, if I'm really dominating other humans, that to me doesn't feel like a great thing. I mean, I played Paperback. When was it that I played it with Krys and Nicole? It doesn't even really matter. And, you know, there's enough randomness in the game that even though I'm actually better at making words, I didn't win. And that was quite a nice experience, that there were different strategies. There's also this aspect of when do you buy these things. And McCall managed to get this amazing combo in the last turn where it like 2 or 3 cards, I can't remember which one. It was, oh, you did that. And like, if like, there's also the question of how much randomness you want, but McCall did buy those cards. Those cards were in McCall's deck. And then she managed to get them at the right time, and it was like, hey, I'm having this amazing turn, and then we all kind of delighted in that moment. It was kind of this shared magical moment.
Well, they I mean, paperback, it can have these big moments where you find the perfect word and all the powers are going off in your words, and that feels really good. But there was this, even when I was testing it at Amazon, there was this moment where people kind of went over that line of like competition, because what would happen is someone's like, I know there's a word here, you know, and they would like they would look at all their cards, you know, and other people just wanted to help, like people just like, well, like, you know, and so people would come over and they'd put their cards out, and like everyone was trying to find a word for them, and it was this behavior. Even I found in other groups that I didn't even encourage it, where people were turning it into a cooperative game, even though there was a score at the end and everything. People liked that puzzle so much that people wanted to work together on that problem. And so we were able to codify it a little bit in what's called the bounty system. It's a variant rule that I very much encourage people to use, that like you can put your cards out and say, I have a bounty on this, you know, and what you're doing is you're saying, I want some help. And the people suggest words. And if you use one of their words, they get a cube that they can then spend on their turn. And so you're helping them and they're helping you in this competitive game. But I don't know, I was just playing off of like, you know, that natural behavior that people, like, this is the game that people wanted to play, and this is how they wanted to play it. You know, versus like I worked with people that do the Monopoly IP, and they're hilarious. Because the people that run the Monopoly IP, they're like, everyone's playing our game wrong. I can't believe they're playing it wrong. The game's long because you're using, you know, free parking and you're rolling doubles and whatnot. And they're like, if they would just play according to the rules, it's a fast, good game. And they're super defensive about like what Monopoly is, and they don't want to change it. And it's just like, well, you have to lean into how people are enjoying your game and meet them there.
I mean, I don't want to talk about Monopoly too much. I mean, look, we played by the rules, and it still took us a very, very long time. The official rules, when I was a child, I was super into games. I know this isn't true of most children, but I really enjoyed reading rule books. I still do sometimes. And it's not what I spend all my time doing, but like back then when we had like maybe 5 games, it was like, oh, okay, we've played this. Let me actually read the rule book and see if we're playing it all correctly. Okay, we are. Cool. Like we never used free parking. We always did the auctions. Yeah. But you can play it by the rules and still end up in 2 superpowers going back and forth and lots of people being eliminated. Now, Jess, beforehand, when we've been talking about Monopoly, has made a point that Monopoly is actually a really nice game for people if you don't feel like you have to finish it, if you know what I mean. Because there are a certain group of people for whom, myself included, I feel like I want to definitely finish every game that I start. There's a strong compulsion in me. If I'm watching a film and it's like, oh, this is a terrible film, I'm better at this now, but even if it's on a streaming device, I have a strong compulsion now to just put it on in the background. Maybe I'll go and do other things, but I want to kind of have an idea of how it finishes. Or maybe nowadays I might just look it up on Wikipedia to be like, okay, I'll read through the plots and that's enough. I need that satisfaction of that completion. I've got a strong desire for completion, put it that way. But no, other people don't feel that. So maybe if Monopoly lent into it and it was like, this is a thing that you do for a while and then you stop, and it was like more stop when you want, and that was the bit that they leaned into. That might be interesting. I don't know.
Yeah. My quick homemade variant for you gotta stretch. My homemade variant for Monopoly is playing to two rules. You can't you can't mortgage properties, and you can't sell properties, and you can, so if you don't have enough money to pay rent, you just pay the money you have on hand. You don't have to pay anymore. But the goal of the game is to have like $3,000 in cash. The first person to have $3,000 in cash wins. So when you get money, you can invest in your properties, or you can try to go for the, and so then you start to get enough money in the game, and like one person gets a whole bunch of money, but then they have to pay rent to the other person. They almost have enough money. And then it's more of a race to a fixed amount of money, and no one's getting eliminated. Because if you can't pay rent, then you turn your pockets out, and you don't lose your properties. Because
but
the moment
you still have the problem of feeling like you're a lame duck at some point, because the house rule that I might suggest, if I was to find someone who wanted to play Monopoly all the time, hypothetically, is when one player gets eliminated, that's the end of the game, and it's the player with the most money on hand at that point.
Yeah. I don't know. It just, because really it's that moment, engineering that moment of like, okay, you don't have enough money to pay, is this very disheartening. It's just like, now you're going to bleed to death, for the rest of the,
Yeah.
And so examining that moment and trying to address, like, is there a way that this can pivot? Is this, because it's like the whole game's setting up to that moment of like, okay, it's so expensive here, you can no longer afford to be on my property. What does that mean? So
that's the thing. It is incredibly mean, and for sure, like when you're making deals, when you're negotiating, that can be brutal. Yeah. And I remember playing it. We would normally play it with maybe 2 or 3 or 4 children, and half the table would be adults. Maybe there'd be 1 or 2 or however many adults. But yeah, there were a couple of older people who were like, yeah, that person really understands the maths behind this, and they actually know all the probabilities, and you need to watch out for that. So we learned pretty sharpish about the probabilities of all the games. And I'm not saying it's the worst game out there, but it kind of, what's the most fun element of Monopoly, asks Alex. Design principles suggest that all elements should be in support of the fun parts. I mean, set collection for me.
Yeah. I mean, just the growth of just like the 2 moments. There's a moment of like, I have the set now, and now I can start building on that. It's that, I mean, the Monopoly deal does the set collection pretty well. I mean, that's actually a pretty good game.
Yeah, I was thinking that's like really solid. Now, I did say that we were going to go for about an hour, and it has, already exceeded that, which is such a shame. I want to be really respectful of your time. There's so much more that I would have loved to talk about. I know that you're heading off back to the USA in the very near future.
Are you going to make it over the States to any of the conventions?
I don't know. My plan for international movements is to basically unless like there's someone chooses to pay me, which was a possibility if Inside the Box actually finish with Seize the Power, and then we finished that. Was part of the contract that I would go to Gen Con if they paid me, basically. And so that would be really cool. But for realistically, I'm going to be in UK, France, Germany, Europe for the next year and a half, and then I'm going to migrate to Thailand.
Oh, fun.
But we will see what happens after that. Would be lovely, obviously, to spend a bit more time. As I said in the description, we have had such a fun chat. Well, brief moments at Essen and very short snippets after UK Games Expo closed, 5 minutes of hey, and
yeah, it's good to talk.
But P&P community says Monopoly should have a pawn store to sell things to pay for debts.
I mean,
I think that's just exacerbating the bleed to death kind of thing.
Yeah.
Look, before we finish up, I want to say over to what are you up to? You can share, but only if you want to. So is there anything that you're working on? Anything that you want to point people to? And you can talk about what you're up to today, hopes or ambitions, fun and frivolous, super serious, whatever it is.
I'm working on, like I said, I've got some digital video game stuff I'm working on. Paperback, we've rebuilt Paperback app from the ground up because tech problems, and so we're putting some fun new things in it, and actually need some testers for that. The Paperback app is ready to go. We're working on Paperback Adventures, and the digital version of Paperback Adventures is in progress. And then I've got some new stuff in the Fugitive realm that I'm working on. So
cool. Yeah. And what mediums are those digital versions for?
I mean, mostly we do mobile and PC. So.
Is it going to be OS X compatible?
Yeah, OS X, like Mac.
Yeah, Mac.
I think we can do builds for that now that we're on Unity, but I haven't really tried to sell games on Mac, but I'm open to it.
I mean, if it's on Steam, then it's kind of all one thing.
Oh, you can sell Mac on Steam, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. We can do that. So.
And if people are interested in helping playtest those things, and personally, I am fascinated by what you're trying to do for Paperback Adventures, how would people get in touch? And Nicholas is also interested. There you go.
Yeah. Let's see. I mean, we have a Discord channel that's kind of like the testing ground. I don't know where the invite is for that. I think because I have a Patreon, but it is open to other people. I guess the easiest probably is just to DM me on Twitter, and then I can get you information. But there's a Discord, and we'll dump builds into there. And then other times I'll do more open, like, hey, who wants to test? And I'll do just like a Google form. So, but usually I'll announce on Twitter. So.
And if people want to check out your website, then it's Fowers.games, and on Twitter it is T Fowers.
So it's Black Friday, and I don't really have any sales, but
I don't do sales either. Yeah, we've talked about so much. Myself, I forgot to say what I'm up to. I am still focusing on my move. Like, it was meant to happen a week and a half ago, but regular viewers know that the van got stolen, which was super bloomin' aggravating. I mean, it's very disheartening to have a van stolen from right in front of your house. And when it's locked up and everything. But, I've hired people to come and bring their own van, and it will be hopefully a faster thing, and take all the stuff to the new place, and that will be good. Because of that, there might be a few days where my internet connection is not particularly good, but I'll use my phone anyway until Tuesday when it's meant to get fixed. today it's basically making sure that all of that is in place. And also tonight, I'm hoping to go and play a bit of El Grande with.
That's
So
great.
that is.
That's a good one.
We have talked about so much. We talked about dairy farms, and we talked about getting into games through Puerto Rico and being entranced by Power Grid, and growing up and looking at t-shirts, nondescript t-shirts, just because apparently t-shirts fascinate a 3-year-old because you're free, and t-shirts are amazing. They are a brilliant thing.
Yeah,
We talked about walks and hiking and exploring all the paths and randomized walk, and how like a computer randomized walk makes a pitchy picture, kind of like pink noise, if that's the correct term for pink noise that we think it is. And we talked about like on Amazon, making little word searches and things, and then being like, oh no, none of my games can actually get accepted. They're not going to get made. Well, I might as well work on something totally different. How about some board games? Do you like my board games? And then people saying, yeah, these are cool games, keep going. And then you put them onto Kickstarter and you kind of establish a following. We didn't really talk too much about your experience of your principle of making a thing. Like, there are so many other shows out there where you've talked about, hey, things are viral, keep going. You advocate everyone being their own self-publisher, which is really interesting. I would love to have you back on at some point in the future. I know that the time zones probably won't quite work, but maybe for my 600th episode, depending on when that is, can have you on for a bit. And it's just super lovely. And for now, if anyone wants to check me out, I'm stuffed by Bez everywhere. I'm not going to have any special guests or anything on for a while.
Yeah, how about you work on getting moved? Just get
exactly get like I'm going to do these short things, but yeah, I'll be still streaming every day at 10 a.m. UK time. It'll be like a topic, maybe something I say and decide in the morning. If you have an idea, let me know. Share, spread the word. And I want to say thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone who's been joining in, watching along. I see there's like been a good crowd. There's been lots of comments. Thank you, everyone who contributed. And yeah, thank you for this lovely mention. PNP community who says, enjoy watching the show. Thank you both for your awesome work in the gaming world. You're both awesome. Oh, that's lovely to see. Oh, that's really affirming. And yes, thank you, Tim Fowers, for this lovely chat. It has been lovely to, have a proper chat.
Well, thanks much. And we'll talk again soon.
For sure. For now, the only thing I have to do one quick thing for Twitch, which is to say, let me recommend someone. Let's go with Amadeus Music. Is a wonderful musician, and we are going to, if you like piano music, then Amadeus Music is who we're going to read. And the only thing left to say for now is bye, 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 bye. This is the goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. Now it's time to go. Bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye-bye.